know it's hard to work it all out and schedules, and we're in different locations, etc. So it's really nice to have a good crowd here. We have a lot to cover. My name is Victoria Vesna. I'm here from UCLA, and I'll be moderating more as a kind of a timekeeper and introductor. And I'll keep everything on my side very brief because there's so much to cover and there's so many amazing people that will speak, however briefly. We'll start with Faces, a very important group that laid the groundwork for what we're going to cover today. And Diana McCarthy, who lives and works in Berlin, will be moderating this session. She's the founding editor of the award-winning Free Artist Radio, Reboot 88.4 FM in Berlin, and a co-founder of the Faces mailing list, which is historical and really important. She's also founding member of the Radio.fm network of cultural radios, and started off as a cyberpunk in the 90s. She's still a cyberpunk in disguise, I think. McCarthy was active in NetSculpture, working with Metaforum, Faces, NetArt, and NetTime mailing list. She's been Hackerspaces, MicroEV, and Prologue, New Feminism, New Europe. So please give her a thundering applause.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria, for the introduction, and thanks to all of you for being here. So basically, I'm introducing the panel from cyberfeminism, from C to X, so networked feminisms, which is going to look at the basically different types of feminisms that have emerged around and over the last 20 years, and how feminist engagement with technology remains important today. I just want to say shortly that this is also part of celebrating 20 years of the Faces mailing list for women in media. And I have to point out my colleagues Rita here, Rita, and Vali Georgievich. And also, we really have to send greetings to our colleague, who's very important, not only to Faces, but to women in media, Kathy Ray Huffman. Due to time and other resources, she's sending us her best wishes from California. So, Kathy Ray Huffman. We want to thank Ars Electronica for taking up our proposal to do this panel discussion and giving Faces a little bit of space. And we'd also like to thank the wonderful artists Veronika Kren and Vesela Mihajlova for doing the taste of data and preparing Faces-generated cupcakes. So you might see these on the table. And it does turn out that apparently data-driven cupcakes can taste good when feminists are baking them. I'd also like to thank Ars and Veronika Liebel, Victoria Voss for organizing, coordinating this event for us. And also Tatiana Villakob and Emiko Ogwa for preparing the technical setup here. So really, let's get into it. We've got we've got 1 hour, and we have a lot of material to go through. And so I will be introducing our three speakers, who are all very, I think, important and representative of different approaches to feminists working with technology. We will have Alla Mitrofanova, who is one of the most, I think, eminent feminist scholars and philosophers, not only in Russia, but around. And I think her work remains important and inspiring for generations of feminists everywhere. So Alla is here. I'm going to start with Alla Mitrofanova. We've got Virginia Barratt, who is one of the founding members of the really amazing cyber-feminist collective VNS Matrix, who came out of Australia just over 20 years ago. And she is a writer, a performer, and a researcher. And yeah, she will also be giving a talk, so. And of course, we've got Annie Go, who is an artist and researcher. She's also the first recipient of the Stuart Hall Fellowship at Goldsmiths in London. And I think she's also interesting because she's one of the people who's been studying different approaches to techno-feminism, so cyber-feminists and so on, so as part of her research. So we're going to start with Alla Mitrofanova, then hand the mic over to Virginia Barratt, and then go over to Annie Go, and then we'll follow that up with a little discussion. So, Alla Mitrofanova, please.
This is yours, right? And this is the clicker if you want
maybe.
it. Yeah.
Oop. It doesn't work. You say I click. No, I click, it doesn't work. Oh, okay. In Russia, there are just few feminist philosophers, so we are all well known. It's just one reason to be well known. And I'm going to present some speculations about how I could imagine the situation between two generations of feminism. This is my slogan, and situation I see as we came together with new technology, and this new space was completely unknown, with no meanings. And so we use poetic metaphor, and we try to see and to put images in that place and to install some practice. And we came from alternative culture. And new generation, which came just a few years ago, came from the center where new political theory is constructing. So new generation is much more involved in politics, in new rationality, and they have very different asks from us. A few years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I realized that I obliged to do something for them. So they ask about history, they ask about methodology, they ask about ontology. And so my current project is feminist ontology. I do it with new generation of cyberfeminists, queer feminists, and also they don't call themselves like cyberfeminists or queer feminists. They use simple sci-fem, queer fem, right fem, and so on. So it's more practical, and they are very involved in political activism. So that's my first step. I'm going to do presentation in 4 steps. This is a copy of our previous activity. On the corner there is a magazine, which was an internet magazine called Virtual Anatomy. In that time, in early 90s, it was in Russia perestroika time, we just realized that there is no constant, no stable shape of body. Body is a kind of interface between materiality and semiotic. So a body could be organized differently through organs, which are functions, which are items, which are objects in different culture, in different needs. And so we mostly research these connections. So we try to go to liminal experience. So there is performance about pregnancy, because pregnancy usually understood as medical stuff. But this is a performance of group Fabric of Found Clothes. They invited 6 very pregnant performance artists, gave them multimedia table to express their own feeling, understanding, and to communicate with people. And also there is another project, Baby TV. It was about how children before one age could perceive objects, how they are organized in the space. So people were crawling on the table, and camera person crawling behind, searching points of attentions. And so we did a lot of political work because it was necessary to teach women how to do with technology, and we helped to do sites for political feminist organizations. And what is now? This is a project, Sci-Hub, which you probably know. It is done by Alexandra a Balkan. She is a programmer from Kazakhstan, and she lives now in St. Petersburg. She did a program to go directly to the closed scientific libraries. And now more than 70 million people use this program around the world, you see on the map. And she is, for analytics, she is one in the row, Assange, Manning, and so on. But she refused to be in this row because she thinks that attack politicians, to make a direct attack, it's not a political. Political is to install new social practices and then to keep them, to normalize them, just to get a different vote. And of course, she has a lot of problems, a lot of critique from academic people, a lot of critique from computer people. First, as she told, computer people first decided that she is silly avatar of very strong Russian hackers. When they realized that it was done by herself, they told that it's a funny, simple project, and she is like waitress, sharing knowledge which is done by very important people. And also, she is under penalty of New York court. She has to pay $15 million to scientific libraries. And so what is important? Important that new generation of feminist or techno-feminist or sci-fem are involved in politics, they involved in new rationality, and they have very concrete purpose. They have to install precise new social practices. I'm afraid I don't have time, but there are other projects about installing social practices which go directly, besides unclean laws or right-wing laws, but always it's possible to find a way. And in Russia, there is a very strong new generation, media activism. I just mentioned one slogan, national idea of Russia is feminism. So it's quite provocative. It just directly go into media space with scandal. And there are a lot of projects like this. And the next step. If we want to change society, we have to do some work before and some methodology. This methodology could be taken from Russian history. On the first Congress of Women in Russia, 1908, they did statement that politics is not macro-politic. It's connected with macro-politic, hardly connected with everyday life. Everyday life is connected with body, and so to have a result, it's necessary to not only to do revolution, but to do new rationality in law, to provide new social, gender-based institutions, and they did a lot of things like women departments around the whole country. And so it's methodology. Methodology means that everything connected, and you could go in this new reality from any side, because reality is not stable, it's not based on universality, on nature, it's always in process of self-realization. And they installed a lot of social political institutions to make invisible presence of women visible. So home space became political space, and that's why we have kindergartens, schools, abortions, and so on. how to present it in gender term. In 70s, 80s, feminist epistemology came. Especially in the United States, it was a movement. And they realized that classical opposition, subject-object, is gender-based opposition. So gender is empiricism of classical thinking. That's why if we don't want to keep this, so we have to move in media space, in middle space. But middle space is very complicated, so we have to install and invent new social practices and new cultural practices, new semiotics. And so in 80s and 90s, people around the world try to do this mixture gender art pieces. And you see here some Russian things. And what we have in early 90s, we have, on the base of feminist epistemology, we have three important feminist programs. So I will not call them. So you could read. And so what is next? Feminist epistemology means that we change our knowledge construction. And we have to discover new articulations, new rationality, but it's only about knowledge. What is next? Next is ontology. If feminism goes further, so it's necessary to do ontology. Ontology means that new rationality, new reality should be understood in more or less complete way to install new institutions. And I will not go in deep here, but you just could mention, I selected among a lot of new ontologies, it's a new, kind of new movement of last 10 years. All philosophers produce new ontologies. So I selected feminist ontologies with very strong feminist background, methodology, which are taken in which are taken this new disposition. So disposition, no nature, no culture, but mixture. So, so that's all. I hope that I'm in time, right?
Absolutely perfect, and we'll continue with some questions. So, okay, next I'd like to invite Virginia Barratt to take the stage.
First of all, PDF or?
No.
Just click here one by one.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thanks, Diana and Alla. Xenofeminism is a gender abolitionist, anti-naturalist, techno-materialist form of post-humanism, building upon the insights of cyberfeminism. Its future is unmanned. This provisional definition of post-cyberfeminism was offered by Helen Hester of Laboria Cubonics, co-creator of the Xenofeminist Manifesto in her paper, N Hypotheses of Post-Cyberfeminism. In 1994, VNS Matrix created a poster with the slogans, "The clitoris is a direct line to the matrix," and "The future is unmanned." When Helen was writing this article, she had a query about the origin of the slogan, "The future is unmanned," which sent me on a rabbit-holing expedition. I felt sure it had come from Sadie Plant's book Zeros and Ones, but this book was published in 1997. On page 59 of Zeros and Ones, Sadie's notes cite VNS as the source for both. Page 59, "The clitoris is a direct line to the matrix." VNS Matrix, billboard. Page 59, "The future is unmanned." VNS Matrix, billboard. In my explorations, I discovered these quotes, one dated prior to the VNS Matrix unmanned poster and one after. "No longer the void, the gap, or the absence, the veils are already cybernetic an interface taking off on its own unmanned futures. Sadie Plant, The Future Looms, broadsheet, 1993. And this, woman's emergence is man's emergency. History was remembered, but the future is unmanned. Sadie Plant, from Cyber Noodle Soup Scene, sometime after 1995. This lack of a definitive origin, VNS Matrix appropriating it from Sadie, creating a mutant mashup, Sadie reattributing it to VNS Matrix reattributing it to Sadie, and so on and on and on and on, is indicative of the pioneering impulse of the appropriating and mutating, mutual contamination, schizo-ethos of the time, co-creation to the point of not knowing who made what or where you begin or end. The future is unmanned is a collective product, in a way, emerging from the contemporary cultural matrix itself, rather than any individual. Of her own offering, in response to the Old Boys Network's 100 antitheses, Helen states that this hypothesis eschews originary status, answers the call of the antithesis, and waits and invites revision. Bear with me while I switch tenses a lot, and in a poetic turn, in VNS speak, offer an interpretation of a cyberfeminism that was never one, and thus is mutable. Eschews both originary status and a linear chronology, but rather creeps and grows slime-wise, polycephalic, acephalic, non-binary, decentralized, non-reproductive, opportunistic, forking, anti-genealogical, ectogenetic, a feedback loop, an open mouth, a zero. Across feminisms and generations and waves, spawning multiple collaborative anti-authorial unfurlings across spiral space. Cyberfeminism was and is speculative, techno and cyber-positive, anastrophic eventscape, a hyperstitional project that became a time machine, an open platform of strategic insurgencies and tactical affective gestures interrogating the patriarchal power structures of the techno-industrial military complex, or, more simply put, Big Daddy mainframe. Or in Donna's words, the informatics of domination. Its future is undaddied. I am using the term positive here as opposed to utopian, but to take from utopian ideals a sense of the power of the imaginary. It is true to say that while I don't think that cyberfeminism was utopian in its practices or theories, I do think that the power of the imaginary was weaponized and deployed by early cyberfeminism as a speculative strategy towards creating future-oriented feminisms at ease with computation. Did girls need modems? Cyberfeminism circa 1991 was a hit-and-run, smash-and-grab action by white, middle-class, cis women for same. It could only be what it was until it wasn't. To tell the truth, or a fiction, VNS Matrix began as a feminist porn cartel named Velvet Down Under. They rose from the cyber swamp in the South Australian summer of 1991 on a river of slime and unleashed the blasphemic techno-porno code that made machines pleasurable and wet. A linguistic weapon of mass instruction, the cyber-feminist manifesto struck at the mass erection of the techno-patriarchal order. We loved with machines, in a most unholy alliance, mobilising Haraway's cyborg subject of political reflection and agency through a mutant family, complete with contradictions, parodic characterisations, navigating the contested zones by rational and irrational compasses, fuelled by G-slime. We slipped into the interstices of unguarded institutional spaces and sent bitch, beg, snatch, dentata, and of course all new gen on their mission. This one cyber-feminist origin story is suitable for fireside chats. Cyberfeminism circa 1991 had glaring insufficiencies. The first ram raid on technology's sanctified halls was a gender war, paying little heed to the political economy of technological production and consumption, the mining of rare earth, chip labour, small deft hands, access, systemic racism, clean water. In promoting the consumption and use of certain technologies as tools for emancipation, we ignored our complicity in oppressive practices. But that first action, with all its insufficiencies, smashed the field wide open, and these gaps provided pivot points towards a more intersectional cyberfeminism. Its strength lay in its capacity to pivot and shape-shift in response to critique and changing material and social conditions, endlessly fail-safing, pivoting and repurposing towards the next new world disorder. This might be called becoming. In a sense, the technology was immaterial to our purpose, which is probably strange to say, but by that I mean both of little consequence and what I would have called then virtual. What we were attempting to do was to open source feminism, and the means of achieving this aim were virtual. We were no machine queens. We were a mutant family of punk DIY autodidacts whose coding and hacking exploits were parodic and poetic and performative in the sense of creating technologies such as manifestos, virtual worlds of words, invocations, performative hexecutables, linguistic weapons of mass instruction, and ludic spaces of speculation and manifestation. But these tactical affective gestures, as Francesca de Rimini would call them, became material. Poetry transformed into platforms, manifestos transformed into machine languages, moo workshops transformed into a bridge across which a riot of girls stormed to wrest control of machines and technologies from the gatekeepers and overlords. How can speculation act as a trigger for the future? Viennese Matrix started a conversation with the futures in 1990. The futures have been speaking back to it ever since. I always thought of cyberfeminism as speculative. The early works of Viennese Matrix were vaporware. All New Gen was never a game, it was a hyperstition. It was drawing a door in a wall in order to pass through it. It was hyping and hacking a skill set. It was setting a series of traps for the future that would be triggered when the correct confluence of happenings aligned. Current technologized feminisms have retrochronically operationalized early progressive cyberfeminist concepts, have stepped through the door in the wall and complexified the notion of the geek girl or the cyborg becoming goddess. In a way, I feel like the problems with the term cyberfeminism is a problem of nomenclature rather than a problem of strategy. Googling cyber anything at this point returns security, terrorism, bullying, war, attacks, hate. Dan O'Hara of the notorious CCRU comments on the implications of the term cyber. A word which originally connotes control over a situation, as in cybernetics, has come to be used as an accent for any socially undesirable situation over which we do not have control. In that sense, the word has become a linguistic skeuomorph, its functional meaning inverted as it becomes used in the new context of net culture. I know that this terminology is just a signifier. It's historicity affording it a direct line to the matrix, a shorthand to a long story, an access point to a range of practices around feminism, technologies, the use of, consumption of, critiques of, politics of, applications of, materializations of, speculations towards a feminist politics of technology. Besides, E-feminism just doesn't have the same ring, although some would probably say I-feminism is closer to home. Or we could just call it feminism, since cyber is now inside feminism, since technology is embedded in all of culture, really. These things are assemblages. The increasing emergence of collaborative ventures like Laboria Cubonics, CyberTwee, FemTechNet, Black Quantum Futurism, Transhack Feminist, Gynae Punk Collective, Deep Lab, Sub Rosa, Black Girls Code, and other collective cyber, feminist, hacktivist, and futurist projects are demonstrative of the abiding importance and tentacular reach of progressive techno-feminisms across the membranes of sciences, technology, and culture. The future is unmanned, says Zoe Sifoulis. That is, neither dead or collapsed, but animated by other dynamic agents, including women and machines, and I would add, familiars and companions, and the unnamed, unnumbered that swarm all over us and between us now, deprivileging our human bodies as discrete organic things. We are still the future cunt, infiltrating, disrupting, disseminating, corrupting, in a poetics of jouissance, madness, and unholiness, The slime code abides, our mucus even more hostile, unfaithful to the end. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Virginia Barratt. And I would like to now introduce Annie Go. So, go, go, go. Go, Annie, go.
Thanks. It's with yours or no?
No.
Last one's right.
Thanks, that's fine.
Then you can just click this
Okay,
part.
cool, thanks. Hi, thank you, Diana and Faces, for the invitation to speak here. So, although I'll try and be as quick as possible because I'm aware that the time is running on. Although I have been invited as a representative of the younger generation, I just begin by making a disclaimer that I don't claim to represent anyone apart from myself, and I speak definitely from a position, my own position and my own experiences as an artist working with sound and media, and as a curator and researcher as well. So in 2014, I organized a panel at Berlin's CTM festival called Sound, Gender, Technology, Where To with Cyberfeminism. And on that panel, I invited Sadie Plant, who's the author of Zeros and Ones, Susanne Kirchmeier, who's an electronic music producer and DJ, perhaps she's here. Hi, Susanne, if you are. And the founder of Female Pressure, a network of women in electronic music. Fender Schrader, who is a transgender-identified media artist and light and sound engineer, and Marie Thompson, who is a writer, academic, and practitioner doing things with music and sound. And the panel took place in light of a survey undertaken by Female Pressure at the time, which had highlighted the huge kind of imbalance in the male-to-female gender ratio at music festivals and labels. And on the slides, you may see a recent survey which they just released a few months ago. Yeah. I won't go into that right now. But, and it's perhaps not dissimilar to what happened at Ars Electronica here last year with the hashtag Kiss My Ars campaign led by Heather Dewey-Hagborg. And whilst I am a member of Female Pressure and I completely support these initiatives, I'm sure I tweeted hashtag Kiss My Ars at the time, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that these fights that we need to fight and are hugely worthwhile and necessary with regards to gender representation at cultural institutions and so on, need to be supplemented, right? There's something missing if we're only fighting along the lines of we need more women. So aside from this kind of simplistic inversion of let's kind of reverse the male-female binary dynamic, I feel that in asking for hashtag equal prizes for equal work, we are buying too simply into the existing framework of art production, art institutions, art funding, art consumption. And if we don't question how the structures of gender intersect with race, class, sexuality, ability, then we aren't really doing the intersectional work which cyberfeminism could and or should do. So this task is obviously very much a process and very much ongoing. In 2016 and earlier this year in 2017, together with my friend and colleague Marie Thompson, we organized a series of events called Sonic Cyberfeminisms, and this included an online reading group called Decolonizing Sonic Cyberfeminisms, a panel event and a conference in the UK. For Marie and I, thinking through sound, and I say this with certain caveats as well because this gets romanticized, but thinking through sound, vibrations, and affect affords us potentially a way out of the kind of traditional dualisms which we are often caught in. Sound is a powerful force, and perhaps by thinking through sound, we can move towards more complex relational modes of understanding. As a result of these events, we brought into being a small network, and I think it was fairly successful, although it's still very much in its beginning stages, in bringing together previously isolated women, trans-identified and queer musicians, sound artists and theorists into a network where we really try to foreground an intersectional feminist practice. So I don't have long, so I'm just going to try and talk about two things, basically. Why sonic cyberfeminisms, and then secondly raise a few provocations regarding cyberfeminism and the notion of technology, what this does, and what feminist criticisms of technology can do and are at the same time sometimes unwittingly complicit in. So the prefix cyber, as Virginia also referred to, might seem a bit contentious. For me, being born in the 80s, I attribute it to cyberspace of the 1990s, and from my point of view, it's haunted with a kind of quaint nostalgia about those hopeful utopic days. So cyberspace and cyberfeminism are often read, in my view, in a kind of techno-utopic way, as a simple celebration of technology, which we now, with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps view more cynically. I don't think that these debates about cyber utopias or dystopias are that relevant anymore, and I don't think we even need to choose between critique and affirmation. I think cyber can be both, and I would argue in the 90s it was both, and with this openness that we should perhaps revisit. I think it's a good idea to trace the prefix cyber back to the idea of steering, controlling, and with reference to Norbert Wiener's 1948 publication on cybernetics as control and communication in the animal and the machine, as indeed Faith Welding does in an essay which was really important to me called Where is the Feminism in Cyberfeminism? So understanding cyber in terms of power and control and thinking through sound and the sonic as a way of avoiding this binary thinking is partly what I think makes sonic cyberfeminisms an interesting concept to work with. So the second thing I wanted to address was I'd like to advocate for more attention to the notion of technology and thereby think about the more ordinary and mundane uses and conceptions of technology which are often left ignored over in preference of the kind of sexy, exceptional, high-tech conceptions of technology. The feminist science fiction writer Ursula Le Guin responded to a book review once which called her, quote, not a hard science fiction writer. And in a way, I think this exemplifies some of the issues which are in need of attention in cyber or techno-feminism today. We tend to conflate this term technology with the high-tech. But as Le Guin argues, quote, technology is how a society copes with physical reality, how people get and keep and cook food, how they clothe themselves, what their power sources are, what they build with and what they build, their medicine, and so on. So technologies are not just smartphones and computers. And obviously and crucially, there are hierarchies attached to what is elevated to the status of high technology. In the Sub Rosa Domain Errors publication from 2002, Michelle Enright traces the hierarchies which posit the progressive, technologically advanced, middle-class white Americans on the one hand as above or ahead of a quote-unquote untechnological black working class as they are portrayed in popular discourses in the late 1990s. Technology, as Wright demonstrates, becomes a playing field upon which racist dynamics, which perpetuates white European superiority are played out. African American technological innovations, which often do not fall within a high-tech category, are forgotten by history. Technological superiority becomes a stand-in for intellectual and cultural white Euro-American superiority. With regards to these claims, within cyber and techno-feminism, I argue that the question of technology has still not been properly theorized or unpicked, and that without such critical questioning, we're not well equipped to deal with contemporary challenges. We risk making the main aim an inversion of the current male-dominated fields of technology, rather than this being a mere indication of the plethora of inequalities being hidden. So to end, to summarize, this was the reading group. I'd like to emphasize what I believe can be cyberfeminism's role in illuminating criticisms where they need to be made. I'd like to draw your attention to this initiative by Girls Who Code, and thank you, shout out to Marie for giving me this slide. Girls Who Code, who are an initiative supporting the education of young women and girls into computer programming and jobs in the tech industry. And they collaborated with a summer school and workshops with Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin, as you may or may not know, are the world's largest weapons and military services company, profiting hugely financially from war and also producing nuclear weapons. So in asking what we're complicit in when we insist upon more women in tech, we also need to reflect upon what else we are supporting in media, art, and festivals such as Ars Electronica and tech companies and in tech culture as a whole. So in simply making the main agenda more women, it doesn't unpick the structures, deeply entwined structures of the military-industrial complex with and how gender, race, class, and ability, patriarchy, all those sorts of things are implicated within them. And to close, I'd like to refer to a figure which Sarah Ahmed has written a lot about, the feminist killjoy. The feminist killjoy is the one who disturbs or spoils an otherwise happy consensus and is usually charged with ruining an atmosphere. And I think what we need now more than ever are cyber-feminist killjoys in all of these conversations about technology. That's it.
Thank you. Let's move over to the conversation area. So, yeah, is this on? So maybe we can get Lockheed Martin to pay for the Sci-Hub court fees. Maybe that's how they can support Girls Who Code more effectively. Thank you so much for these presentations, and I know that we were meant to have 1 hour. We started a little bit late, so we'll try to keep it in range. But I wanted to just immediately present one question to all three of you. Thank you so much for sort of mapping out a lot of different ways to be radical figures of change as feminists in the world. So one thing I'd like to ask you is, how important do you see feminism in terms of creating those imaginary spaces that open up a room for potential and for potential places of real change in the real world? And I'm going to start with Alla and ask the same question to each of you, okay?
Feminism came from female experience, that's for sure. Female experience was excluded from culture, that's also we know. So it was kind of objectivation and naturalization of abstract femininity. Or term abstract femininity means that female experience is unspokeable, kind of resource and self-evident. It should be done by itself. And when paradigm changed, so what was excluded became very interesting and very fruitful. So those tiny practices or constant practices are very useful in understanding of our contemporary condition of labor, because we work at home, we have no divisions between rest and work, so it could be self-exploitation, but in the same time, it's a condition of feminine labor. So there is a lot of practice and analytics which could be used by contemporary politicians in defending labor, in organizing labor, and that we see in many different spaces. I just told an idea of Helen Hester, a xenofeminist, from her concept of feminization of labor. And also we know that machines are feminized. But it's not clear, but according Donna Haraway, we see it when we have new anxiety about machines. Machines could do reproduction of itself, what it means. Machines became tiny, very close, almost invisible, so they are in feminine place. And so in politics, when we deal with those practices, we could save ourselves from new, very rigid and straight rationality, which could came from subject of power to objects of people. So going to feminism and taking feminist theory back into big political theory means to save ourselves from repressive rationality. So that's...
Right. So, sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so how important is feminism in terms of creating, like, basically these imaginaries, these places where people can go conceptually in order to...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's in terms of my own kind of practice and my own collaborative processes with other feminists. I think, as I mentioned, this kind of idea of the power of the imaginary was something which provided an access point, particularly in terms of practice, like a lot of our work was around workshops for young women to allow them to find access points around how to use machines to either create databases and what that data might be used for. It could be any number of things, or kind of throwing down a ladder to younger women to say that they could access feminism through machines, or access machines through feminism. So for me, I think that the act of kind of weaponizing the imaginary is super important in providing access points to kind of an idea of open sourcing feminisms, or creating feminism as an open platform.
Yeah, I think I'd like to clarify, so in bringing up this figure of a cyber-feminist killjoy, that this in no way kind of excludes having feminist imaginaries or detracts from the importance of doing so at all. I mean, because I'm an artist and a researcher, so then I have this kind of double, like, split personality between, and I guess you could say the thing about having the optimism of the will and the pessimism of the intellect. You kind of need to have both and have them in a kind of productive combination. And I think, to be honest, like, Donna Haraway's work is a perfect example of this, and I get annoyed when people use Cyborg Manifesto and remove it from its feminist and its anti-capitalist and anti-racist roots, and use it as a simple celebration of the cyborg, precisely for that reason, because there is a way of feminist imagining, and I mean, everyone has different politics, but with a certain kind of politics behind it, which often gets missed out in discourses today. So I think definitely huge fan of feminist science fiction. I think that's a massive kind of amazing repository of speculative ideas, and we can't let this idea of speculation be co-opted by the mainstream. Yeah.
And I do have to say, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, like, I'm rushing us through. This is like speed dating or something. I don't think, one thing is that I hope there are a whole lot of feminist killjoys here today picking up useful tricks. I actually think like being a feminist killjoy is just being, or a cyber feminist killjoy. I think it's one of the necessary tactics. Do you have a little joke for you? Just to prove that I'm not a total killjoy. How many cyber feminists does it take to partition a hard disk? That's not funny. You know, okay, I would like to go on because one of the things that I think is there's a kind of, for me, an urgency to having basically the feminist ontology that Alla talked about, to having these like weaponizing ideas and to having this new, like more critical space that understands the importance of engaging with race, class, and gender. Like I think these are tools that we have and they help us to think and they help us to act. One of the things is that I think, like Alla, you're living and working in Russia. Virginia, you're living and working in Australia. Annie, you're living and working, in the UK. Oh, and I think we're all looking at new forms of localized and internationalized forms of an extremely hardcore right-wing movement that has the potential to impact all of us. And for me, it does look like basically feminist thinkers are more needed than ever in order to combat these new forms of basically, it's really, these are life-threatening situations that are mostly impacting women, minorities, and poor people, and not just in, like, basically rich countries, but around the world. So then we're going to go in the reverse order and give the mic first to Annie, and then Virginia, and then Alla, so. Oh, God. Okay, like basically because of the, the conditions of the world that we live in right now, the right wing, like different right wing movements that exist in that manifest themselves differently where each of you live, but overall in the whole world. And we've got a really new, strong right wing international movement. It's often called the alt-right, using media. So this is, for me, something that, like, it makes the type of work that all three of you have described even more urgent, I think. So this is, and I would like maybe you to address that, like like basically feminist practices in relation to a new, like, heavier state of alt-rightness.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think if we look at the history of like 4chan in relation to the rise of alt-right, and I know certain scholars have been working on this topic, we can see that this kind of lawless freedom of internet thing is actually not as great as it was once kind of hyped to be. I think there's also certain slippages between the whole discourse around information wants to be free, there should be no state intervention in the internet, which I think needs to be updated. And I don't have any concrete solutions for this, but I think there are certain problems with the push towards just freeing everything as if that's going to solve. Yeah, and there's the same thing with like who or what are we celebrating today in tech culture. There's a big, like, many terrible people there that get celebrated left, right, and center, or I won't even start right now, but many problems there too.
It's a huge question, and I think from the beginning, we were always kind of, at least the cyberfeminism that I am familiar with, and I may well have kind of divorced myself from it a little bit, but maintained, as I said, it just kind of, I suppose, its power lies in its ability to repurpose itself towards new social conditions and new materialisms and so on. And that, for me, this whole thing of information wants to be free, or whatever the slogans were, you can leave your body behind, and so on. We were test driving those promises, and they were found to be wanting. It was important then, and it's important now to never be a clean and proper body within the realms of media space or cyberspace or whatever. So for me, these kinds of, I guess it's just maintaining that interventionist practice, but again, I don't have any, big answers to a big question, but yes, just to say that it was always important to me to be able to identify the weak points, exploit the gaps, repurpose towards
a new world disorder, and so on. Yeah.
Of course, as you noticed, in Russia there is a very conservative tone now. So we have patriotism, religious, and 20 or maybe 30 years ago, Eva Kosovsky-Sedgwick discovered a term, gender panic. So when panic appears, when a situation is changed very quickly and people don't have reflection enough, it's difficult to understand. And those complicated relationships became more and more simple. People want to do it in more simple. And it's like, I don't like this reality, I just jump from that. But question is, a lot of political leftist theory now like this. But question is that there is no space to jump. So if we jump, if we neglect reality, so we came very quickly in very conservative, very straight relationships. So and I see how new ontologies are understood in that conservative way. People try to do moral understanding of new ontology. Why it's so flexible, unstable, so probably we are in dark world. And in dark world we have to be esoterically liberal. So that's why I decided to work with feminist ontologies, because for them reality is a very flexible and fragile thing. So it's necessary to cure, to have very different kind of politics. So I hope that, as I noticed, there are more and more women, young women in political groups. And I think it's not just because they are active personally. It's because they are needed in this situation. A friend of mine was giving lectures on feminism in leftist radical group. In few years, those radical group between radical left and radical right, just tiny space, and they became feminists, supporting feminists. They are doing video blog, ask questions from feminists, and so at least the one political way is organized and more complicated situation, yeah.
We're really getting close to the close of our 1 hour segment here. I wanted to maybe say one thing is that I think it's important that we've mapped out a lot of different feminist positions towards being in the world, but one of the things that was important that you raised, Alla, and I think everyone would share this, is a feminist commitment to changing the world for everybody. So we're not talking about including more women, we're talking about structural changes that allow for different types of engagement and participation in general. So that means for basic that we have to always address different, race, class, and gender manifest themselves differently in different places. But it's these are sort of basic things to understand that the world needs to change in order to take these on board. And so this is one thing, and I again want to thank Ars Electronica for taking up our proposal for this discussion. And we hope that, we keep coming back and we never stop asking for more space, more money, more resources, more time. And that's one of the challenges, and also to, keep pushing these agendas forward. So I'm going to say we're going to almost give up our time. I would like to ask the three of you again, and, I wish we had more time than this little hour, but maybe to give really short final statements. And, I would even go with slogans. Virginia, you get to start this time because we've done it both ways. So.
I've got a million of them. I don't know, I just keep coming back to you know, we're the virus of the New World Disorder. We are still hostile mucus, forever unfaithful, never faithful to any origins. I don't know, I'm the poetic, I don't know. That's all I've got.
Perfect.
I already presented my slogan, feminism. It's not something special, a kind of discourse for women like Wikipedia presented very often. It's in the middle of contemporary ontology, science questioning, epistemology, art practices, everyday practices, and so on.
Closing statements are always hard. I would say that we, especially given this panel is at Ars and the kind of whole focus on the most cutting edge of technology, that we just need to be constantly aware of what we are complicit in and be the biggest feminist killjoys or cyber feminist killjoys as possible whenever it is possible.
Once again, I just want to thank Ars and say happy birthday to the Faces mailing list. And I have to again say hello to Ushi Rita and Vali Georgievich and Kathy Ray Huffman. And thanks to Service Tea here in Linz that has hosts the list and maintains the website. So thanks a lot, and thanks, Victoria.
So initially, this panel was proposed to be called Women and Media Arts, and Diane protested. Thank you. This is a data cupcake. So Diane was, no, we don't want to be women and media arts. And then I saw it and independently said, I don't want to do women and media arts. In the meantime, in parallel, I was co-curating and organizing hastily put together exhibition with very little funds and support from our side and a lot of support from Ars Electronica. And I got together with Xin Xin to co-curate it. And the title ended up porting over to this panel, which really kind of honored our effort, and I'm very grateful for that. The logo was designed by Mariam Razi. I don't know if she's here. Is Mariam here? Maybe not. She's happily looking through post, probably. But she is. Mariam, come on. So Mariam Razi just came from Iran. She contacted me very briefly to say, oh, I'm very interested in Art Science Center. I want to be involved. And I'm from Iran. And then it got into this whole idea of how to put this project together. And she started doing these graphics. And I said, you have to come to Ars Electronica with us. And she applied for a visa. They turned her down. Then she had to go to Tehran to apply for a visa there. Ars Electronica staff tried to intervene. And then she wrote to me on Sunday, I don't think I'm going to make it. And then on Monday, I got it. So can you imagine? I mean, it is so fantastic. You got to give her a hand. You want to say a word? Because that's pretty radical doing in Iran, right? And a young feminist here. Say a word.
Thank you. I just want to thank Victoria and Xin Xin that gave me this opportunity to be part of this great exhibition and this great vibe. Thank you.
And here's your cupcake. Oh, that's cupcake. And then, I don't know if Dawn is here. Is Dawn here? She didn't make it. Dawn is also a designer, Filipino background, and she really helped out with a lot of design at Art Science Center. So I was super pleased when I saw that one of the first things that Alla presented was the Sci-Hub, because, and I really love the idea of just thinking in terms of creating new contexts and new infrastructures. And so when I first saw the definition and who was in the panel, my question was, where are the males? So I want to have some males in this, and so we included that, and we have so many people that we're going to do a lot of rapid fire stuff, so it's going to be exciting. But first, I'd like to present our group. If you haven't seen our exhibition at this place, please go, because this was an amazing effort of a labor of love and community, and all the people are here, and you'll hear about their work. And we had lots of fun, too. So I would like to just present very quickly some of the works that are in the exhibition, because that also presents the artists and their approach. A lot of the artists are Design Media Arts UCLA alumni, and some are ArtSci alumni as well, and then Void Lab Group, which you'll hear about after I talk about the exhibition briefly. So this is a group from, I'm losing my notes now. Can somebody give me the notes? Here we go. This is in passing. I'm sorry. So this is the girls' troupe from Japan. And then we have In Passing by A.M. Darkik, who's, it's a virtual reality experience on what it's like to navigate a public space based on intersecting identities. And she uses the game interface and engine. Silvia Rigon is here, and she'll talk to us about Panther Ray, which is a commentary on media-induced anesthetization with water at the center. And this piece was shown in many different places. I was very eager to include scientists, women. So Christina Agapakis and Ali Harmon did this wonderful piece with dirt and looking through different areas. They actually did a field trip where they were sampling different dirt and showing the diversity. So it's science as process as art, and Christina is now working in a biotech company after doing her PhD. The Antmaster by Gil Kuna. Gil's here. Gil, you want to stand up? If he's here, or he took off. Gil's also a Design Media Arts alumni. He's an active artist, and he did this piece actually in the Science Center, Antmaster. And then Ann Nimitz, are you here? No. Drone Sweet Drone is embroidered blueprints of drones that turn the surveillance on its head. Then we have Christopher O'Leary's animation of speculated landscape from glitched photographs. Follower, Lauren McCarthy, is Design Media Arts alumni, but she's also most recent graduate assistant professor in our department. She did this wonderful piece where you sign up and your GPS is marked, and then one of the volunteers, you don't know who it is, follows you all day. So you have this human following you. It's called Follower. Oh Dear Me by Su Huang, also Design Media Arts alumni. It's a digital analog musical messaging system with specific sites in Scotland and Dundee. And then Mary is here. Mary Maggic will talk to us. She is an ArtSci alumni. She was with us for 2 years before she went to MIT Media Lab, and now she's moved to Vienna. Molecular queering is bringing together gender hacking, intersectional feminism, environmental issues. And then we have Phoebe Hughes' Vexation, which is a musical instrument that's built, and she builds these instruments herself. She plays Eric Satier's Vexation. Noah Kaplan is also a recent grad of Design Media Arts, and now she is at USC doing her PhD. And this is a pseudo-cyborg perspective portraiture that's pulled together from the 1973 film Westworld. This is In Compliant Gate by John Brumley and Sharmi Basu, where an invisible creature is given temporary form through audience participation. And then Olivia, this is Rita Blaik, Tyndall Landscapes. Rita was also ArtSci alumni. She was a PhD in material science. She got her PhD, and now she's doing education coordination at the California Nanosystems Institute and does a lot of workshops and art shows. And then we have, now we have Olivia Osborne. Is she here? Yay, so Olivia just came. She was a postdoc at the California Nanosystem Institute doing nanotoxicology. And this is Meltings of the Heart Change the Glacial Landscapes. And then Xin Xin, who's the co-founder of Void Lab and also co-curator of this show. In this prologue, she questions if decentralization of surveillance can transgress our sense of responsibility of the self and the other. Sang Lim Han is a recent graduate from Design Media Arts, and she did this piece, Shadow Glass, together with Jan Agosta, who's an undergrad, and also Xin Xin. It's based on an interview with Sofia Umoja-Noble about the technological relining. And then we have another Void Lab piece, which is shape-shifting. So I'll keep going until I come to you guys. This is also by Shape-Shifting AI. Sang-Ling Hai, Jen Agosta, and Sarah Brady, all Design Media Arts students and alumni. So it's reflecting on AI and otherness from another point of view. And then we saw this earlier, Tomorrow Girls Troupe, which is actually a fascinating group that we decided to include even though they're not necessarily part of Design Media Arts or Void Lab or Art Science, but we thought because Ars Electronica has such a strong relationship with Japan that it would be important to bring this troupe along because they launched a series of activities to raise awareness of sexual violence in Japan, and they collaborate with a lot of grassroots activists, successfully changing a lot of amendments in sexual crime laws in Japan, and even some interesting dictionary definitions. Yuhao Jing, Real Body. Here she tries to solve the question of sampling her body as a case study. And she looks at what happens when her body is washed and pores, hairs, rashes, and cuticles enlarged. And then Sarah Brady, ATL2, is a generative visualization of fading algorithm of sound and light recorded in real time. Christina Yglesias, who's here, and she'll be up in a second, I haven't told anyone about you, embodies the emotional labor of women on the other end of a crowdsourced relationship and explores the possibility for connection in a hyper-network culture. So a lot of this is grabbed from chats. Again, Sang-Ling Han, Bloom, exploration between 2 and 3D medium. Your Choice by Amanda Stoyanov, also from Void Lab, where she looks at issues of gender representation and uses of technology. And then Eli Yoteva, who I think is here. Are you here, Eli? Everybody's off doing stuff. I don't blame them. So this is, Ellie actually is very much interested in environmentalism, and she may actually join us in the last part where we talk about environmentalism and science and artists. So here it's about, she works with ice, creating these large sculptures of ice and digital memory and the deterioration of ice, moss, and soil. So looking at what's tangible, visible, and virtual. And again, the Believe campaign. Doug Smarch is an early alumni from Design Media Arts and American Indian, who does a lot of very interesting shamanic work, looking at between cruelty and survival, and then Carboniferous by Pinar Yoldas, who also is a recent graduate from Design Media Arts and then Duke University. She just recently got her PhD, I think. And then Scott Hessel's also a recent Design Media Arts graduate, is now working as a professor at Hong Kong University, and he started working with students, taking them to field trips of extreme environments, starting with Joshua Tree when we collaborated with him, and then Antarctica, and then the caves in China. And they would stay for 2 weeks and really, through experience, absorb the intensity of extreme climate change and climate, and then respond to it without kind of imagining it for real. So this is by Aaron Coblin and Ben Trickleback, Light Echoes. Also, Aaron is also a Design Media Arts alumni, and he looks at, the two of them actually did a whole trip where they looked at traces of light that are broadcast with a moving train with laser. And with that, I give you kind of a spectrum of where we're at. So what we try to do is look at climate change and feminism and how it actually is very connected. Because if you think about people who are against or deny climate change, very often will be the same people who are going to deny women's rights. It's almost one-to-one. And we feel strongly, and through research and looking at ecofeminism from 70s to today, that climate change and disasters actually impact women, animals, and poor the most. So it's really very deeply a feminist issue. And it's very important to expand the idea of feminism into diversity. And that's why I actually decided to co-curate and organize this exhibition with Xin Xin, because with the Art Science Center, our focus was very much environmentalism and environmental issues. And Void Lab is a group of self-organized, fourth-generation feminists. And I thought coming together would result in something really rich, and it did. And it really was a wonderful journey that we actually want to further explore and share. So I will now introduce Xin Xin, and she will take it from here. Xin Xin.
Okay. Yes. So thank you, Victoria. Before jumping into the work that we do, I just want to say how enlightening and inspiring and deeply profound to be hearing the previous speech. I was just boiling and just so happy and extremely honored to be here and to be included, to be part of this. So we don't have too much time, we're a little behind. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Void Lab before introducing the other panelists to get on stage and talk about their own art practice and how it relates to the theme that we're talking today. So, Void Lab is an intersectional feminist collective that me and a couple other people co-founded together at UCLA Design Media Arts. It really started as a kind of necessity because gender and race and class issues were so, it was just a lacking topic from the department, and it really just feels like from day to day there was almost no space to breathe and no space to have discussion, let alone like the space to create artwork that feels coming from like where one can like really express their internal thoughts. So I think Void Lab really kind of submerged out of this need and this desire to have a basic space and time. And I think space and time is something that we think about a lot in terms of, you know, how slow can we approach our discussion, how efficient do we have to be, but then does that efficiency compromise the slowness and the kind of need to like really break things down, which is always a very complex and never-ending process. So to kind of go over this a little fast, if you have any questions, feel free to come and ask me after the panel. This is the first flyer that me and my other friend, we just kind of photoshopped, and it was really kind of this like spontaneous, like guerrilla style sort of flyer that we made in 1 hour and pasted it in the female bathroom initially. At the time, we weren't considering intersectional feminism as much. We were really just thinking about ourselves and thinking about, you know, how can we make it better for ourselves. And that really, you know, it all kind of began with a fantasy. All kind of began with this like slight fragment of imagination of what could be better, what could come. And so this is the description of the lab. This is just featuring some of the co-founders that are part of the group. There are a lot of people that's missing from these pictures, but you can kind of see a picture of not just the makeup of our group, but also you can like kind of a makeup of this UCLA Design Media Art at large. It's immediately not the most like diverse community that one can imagine, and that relates to a larger institutional and kind of professional problem that we are all trying as best as we can to reflect on. And so we, as Void Lab, we do exhibitions. A lot of times at school, exhibitions are kind of a scheduled, like permitted thing that's granted by the department. So we like doing things on our own and kind of just like find a space and figure it out and just put up like this kind of impromptu exhibition. This is another example of posters that we made listing different sentences people have said to us that was like coming as a form of microaggression. So for instance, one thing that you could possibly hear in the department, and this actually came to me, so this is heartfelt. I hope that wasn't too technical for you, and also quite fitting for Ars Electronica. So another one is we also organize a lot of panels. For instance, biased data panel. We had panelists, Safia Noble, who I interviewed, and the piece was interpreted by San Lim and Jen, my amazing collaborator, into Shadow Glass, that's also featured in the show, and also Enshao Mina, who is sort of this like internet ethnographer who study memes and movement and how memes have affect activism, also a very good friend. And the third person is Marika Seifer, who talk about the issue of the archive, the nostalgia of the archiving of AIDS in America, and how that kind of become an obstacle towards progress. And yes, and aside from that, we also do a lot of workshop. This is, for example, Art plus Feminism Wikipedia Editathon, which I'm sure a lot of you know about, and it's also something that we've been taking on for 2 years. So this is kind of a slice of a lot of other things that we do. So with that in mind, I'm gonna shift and give the mic to Silvia Rigon. Silvia is a wonderful artist and educator, and also has a piece, Penta-Ray, that's featured in the Feminist Climate Change show.
Thank you so much, Xin. What an honor to be here. First of all, I wanted to say that I also speak from a very personal perspective of an individual artist that sort came to face some of these larger issues of feminism and ecology just in virtue of being alive during this time, right? And trying to really deal with what is very interesting to me, which is the topic of representation. So I'm going to share 3 different projects done at 3 different stages in time. When I was younger, I was very, very interested in the idea of iconography, and especially the iconography of the monster. So when you are interested in this sort of topic, of course, you have to deal pretty soon with the idea of who established the norm and what is the abnormal, how monstrosity is defined against what. And at the same time, I was studying media art, and I was quite interested in this sort of at this time, so we're talking about 2003, 2002, 2003, the way all the discourses and the way the work that I will see, that will get awards and that will be showcased, it was very slick, code-oriented, very visual. There was a very utopic sort of definition of the cyborg and the, the post-humanist discourses in a way that felt very disembodied. And it was also during the time in which the issues of interface and affective theory, how to engage the senses, was quite of an interesting topic. And so I wanted to make an exhibition about the idea of the sense of touch and thinking about the history of this sense in the context of visual art, how it is usually a forbidden sense to approach, how we are often forbidden to touch a work of art. And I was also very interested in the idea of ambivalence, and when we think about nature and culture, when we think about artificial and natural. And so this piece was about these very topics, and it was an interface of trays of silicone-shaped breast, and the audience was asked to interact with this breast and touch it. And of course, it's kind of a really playful and go to the core of what is, what this idea of artificial beauty, what is natural, how we really want to understand our relationship to nature and dig a little bit deeper. And when you will touch this interface, you activate sounds that were animal sounds, but they were very hard. They will come from the Amazon. You couldn't really define the animal that will emit it, and they sounded very primordial. And it also activates sounds from a media history of the topic of the beast. So a lot of movies that deal with this idea of the beast, from King Kong to Planet of the Apes, and so forth. And this torso will progressively become more furry as you keep touching. I also wanted to sort of challenge this idea of duality, binary, and the interface was very soft, very liquid, of course, metaphorically, in a sense. The other piece that I was interested then, that came organically to me, is, again, a deal with the idea of how we really are ambivalent with this idea of nature and consciousness. And I was thinking about, again, the idea of morphology, and I started thinking about the aberrant in biology, so I was looking at cancers and the way it proliferate. And I did a lot of reading in scientific literature and finding out how you know, often in this scientific literature and evidence, morphology and aesthetic play a very important role in defining the healthy cells versus the aberrant and abnormal cell. And within that, I picked a very humble medium, knitting, and I start replicating the formation, the giving form, the giving shapes of abnormal tissue. So through excessive replications, or like you see in the other examples, to your right, how a tissue attempt to heal itself. These two pieces, the first one I submitted to Ars Electronica, and of course I didn't win anything. This piece I submitted to a call for art that deal with art and biology, art and science, and it was also rejected because it was not scientific enough. So I think it's an interesting space to be at, this neither or sort of space. I'm comfortable with it. I think I'm missing one slide, but I guess I can briefly talk about Pantarei, which is the piece that I have in the exhibition. It comes from actually a real news event, and that was done in 2013, so much later. And I was looking at Italian news, and there was this event in Italy, in a city in the south of Italy. After 3 days of rains, all the trash started pouring into the rivers. And it was a very bizarre, weird, absurd, but also kind of spectacular event. And of course, I started thinking about this idea of ambivalence that we have with the culture of excess. We all know how it is damaging our planet, yet it's very hard for us that are maybe complicit, and we live in a privileged position to understand the kind of damage that is being done to nature. And the piece is called Pantarei because it comes from Heraclitus. Everything flows, and is a metaphor for time. But it also is a metaphor. I was also thinking about as a water as a medium, right? Something that carries weight, that transfer from one place to another. Is rendered with a very colorful and cartoon-like, very captivating graphic, and is intended in a certain way to mesmerize, and is sort of meant to provoke, the choices that we are facing in this epoch, and the fact that it seems to be stuck, paradoxically, in this sort of anesthetic overabundance of also media. So thank you. These were my 3 projects, and I'm going to now leave the podium to somebody else.
Thank you, Silvia. So the next one up is Christina Yglesias, and she is also a great artist and a co-founder of Void Lab and a current design media art graduate student. So Christina.
Thank you, everybody. So I've been working on what I've been calling a networked social practice, which is, borrowing social practice as the sort of moment in the 90s and early 2000s in the art world, taking social interactions as material for practice, but applying it today to our sort of hyper-networked culture. And I'm going to focus on the project that I have in the Feminist Climate Change show, which is called I Haven't Told Anyone About You. So the process for the piece began with a startup service called InvisibleGirlfriend.com. It sounds like a joke, but it is real. It's a startup founded in 2013, where you design the ideal woman. And it seems to have, moved back to these very kind of sexist, very idealized images of women that you can kind of shape digitally. As it says, you build her to your specifications. You choose her age, photo, and personality with ease. You pay about $20 to exchange 100 texts with her over the period of about a month. You can always, of course, pay more for more services. They promise an interactive and authentic experience. Conversations are powered by real creative writers, not bots. And it's actually been interesting to trace the way that this service has been marketed over the period of time that it's been available, because first, it only promised the appearance of a relationship. So if your mother was bothering you, like, oh, you don't have a girlfriend by now, you could say, oh, look, she's here. Here's a photo, here's some texts. And then it started actually marketing itself as a way to practice a relationship. The tagline, actually just a few months ago, was something along the lines of, dating sucks, this is a little easier, try it out. And now it's actually just promising the feeling of a relationship, basically the benefits of a relationship without the messiness. And I've really been asking myself this question, especially in relation to the topic of the whole Ars Electronica festival this year. What happens when we start to treat human beings like AI, like bots? And this actually really happens with the service Invisible Girlfriend. They promise this authentic experience with a real person on the other end, but it's actually crowdsourced labor where people are paid very little per text message. And it creates this strange sort of, you get a new person roughly every 10 texts, so there's never kind of continuity in the conversation. And I really wanted to think about labor in this sense, and also the emotional labor that often goes unrecognized and is repressed. So the piece is a video piece where I hired an actress to play my invisible girlfriend that I designed, and I played myself as well in the piece, embodying the text messages, so reinterpreting some of the information that gets lost in only text-based communication. So we kind of attempt to re-embody the conversation and re-infuse all of the sort of social cues that get lost, that we maybe sometimes attempt to put back into text-based conversation with, say, emojis or other methods. And, you know, this was an attempt to sort of also, you know, kind of queer this tool and take this kind of sexist, very Silicon Valley blindsided tool and use it to create a dialogue. So you can see the piece in Feminist Climate Change. Thank you.
Okay, so next one we have Mary Maggic.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Mary Maggic. I'm an artist and a biohacker working in the intersection of biotechnology and cultural discourse. Today I wanted to talk about a project called Open Source Estrogen, which I've been working on for the past 2.5 years. So basically, I got interested in the estrogen molecule as a molecule that is infused with biopolitical power, a molecule which has colonized our bodies, our societies, and our environments. We think about estrogen as the main ingredient in birth control pills, controlling women's reproduction, and controlling gender transition. But actually, estrogen is actually a molecule which exists as a state of toxicity. So this is where the project intersects with not just body and gender politics, but also with anthropocentric toxicities. So thinking about the plastics, the pesticides, all of these molecules that exist now pervasive in the environment that are queering our bodies and bodies of non-human species. So as an artist and a biohacker, my practice is in coming up with these low-cost, accessible protocols for hacking estrogen. So what do I mean by the word hacking? I like to think of it not only as revealing these hidden molecules that are surrounding our daily lives, appearing in our urine, appearing in our waterways. I also think of hacking as hacking the ideologies that are associated with estrogen and hormones. For example, thinking about how gender is codified by hormones, how we're taught to think estrogen produces a female body and testosterone produces a male body. A huge part of my practice is also thinking about how we can shift from the biohacking protocols to creating new narratives of resistance, of refiguring our world. What if there was a fictional cooking show where trans women could share estrogen recipes with each other? What if we could shift toxic shame to toxic embrace? What does it mean to identify with the molecules that your mother is exposed to as you incubate in her womb? What does that mean? What about shifting the idea that our bodies are being disrupted into the idea that we could form a resistant body in the form of a hopeful monster? This was a really interesting article I found last year where they did create an accidental hermaphrodite fish and called it a hopeful monster. And I think that it's a narrative that we could also embrace in thinking about how we could cope and exist with our current toxified planet. So now I'm going to end with a 6-point plan for hormone queering resistance. And I'm not going to, oh, they're all numbered 1. I'm not going to go through every single one, but I'm going to just read the last one, which is the one I want to emphasize. Let's consider the microperformativity of hormones as not just an agential power of molecular colonization, but of also molecular collaboration. Because in the end, we have to live with these molecules, we have to become with them, and therefore we have to let go of the current pre-existing heteronormative systems that are entrapping us into thinking our bodies are being disrupted, that the male and female order is being tainted somehow. What is natural? What is normal? Who are creating these definitions? I think that we as citizens should be able to create these definitions for ourselves. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm not quite sure because we're quite over time, so maybe we don't have time for discussion.
So we're just going to keep going rapid fire, and actually Mary is a perfect transition to introducing environmentalism in science and women in the sciences, which we really wanted to have in the show very much. And I asked James Gimzewski to give a few words because he taught a class on environmentalism in the fall quarter at UCLA just before Trump was elected, and he's also got a lot of women in his lab and students and postdocs from many different countries. So it brought up a lot of issues that I was talking about on the sidelines to the forefront. So please welcome James Gimzewski.
Okay, so it's a real pleasure to be at this particular meeting and actually to be, well, I don't know, I think we have got one more male member going to talk about something. But I have to say that I personally have never really been against the environment or against the feminist movement or the LGBT movement. And that's partially, I think, because I was brought up in the hippie age, you know. And also after that, educated myself in terms of the environment. I do teach an environmental chemistry class, but it covers more than just chemistry. You know, typically it's a bunch of chemical reactions. I do the opposite and try to discuss the world today and the problems we have. And Mary talked about, you know, the toxicological problems, plastic and fish, all the things that are going on, including climate change. And climate change was a large part of my, my course, actually. And when you deal with climate change, you know, we know that there's only a very small percentage of scientists that are disagreeing with the current, you know, predictions. And if you look at the news today, you know, we have 3 massive storms coming and hitting the United States. And somehow it's kind of paradoxical that it happens to hit those states that are particularly against, in some ways, the environment. So it's like a kind of, you don't believe in it? Okay, let's look at this, okay? It's also the case that the people that typically are against, you know, accepting climate change, they fall into more or less 2 categories. The first category is just pure ignorance. And there's a lot of them like that. They are also fed, you know, by the media like Fox News and the likes. And they are just basically ignorant. The other group, they are worse. Those people are not necessarily ignorant, but they are financially, they get money one way or another, whether they be scientists, whether they be politicians, paid by people like the Koch brothers, who are billionaires in the United States, and they don't want to see things change. If we take our president, who has effectively, or is in the process of dismantling the Environmental Protection Agency, it's paradoxical that this storm is actually coming into Mar-Lago, where he has his luxury golf course. So they're either ignorant or basically paid by those types of people that have interests in the fossil fuels. Now, in terms of women, and people that are against, for instance, the feminist movement, as Victoria said, I would say that they're typically also the same type of people. They're also ignorant, and they are living in a kind of industrial model of the past, and somehow they can't educate themselves. So one of the things we can do is to try to individually set an example. The fact that this particular meeting here was not funded in any way by UCLA is due to not a scientist who denied the funding, but someone who calls himself an artist. And he also exhibits certain characteristics that fall along these lines. Likewise, the people who are, have, you know, racial bias tend to be also anti-feminist, and they also tend to be anti-environmental. So what can we do? I think we can try to educate them as much as possible. And through my environmental class, I try to do that. The second thing is, if you're in a total male environment in a laboratory for 3 years to do a PhD, you're going to also develop these tendencies where you don't actually believe in the equality of women in science. So throughout my career, I've had many, many PhD students. I try to encourage as many women as possible so that they work with the men and have some type of dialogue together. And really, that's, I think it's a lack of education. And that's what we are in the job of doing in UCLA, trying to educate people. The last thing I would say is that at UCLA, we have to do a whole bunch of online courses, and one of them is actually about racial bias and bias against women. And it's mandatory. So I think we have to have a kind of open mind and try to educate people against these types of views. And that's more or less my 5 minutes. And yeah, thank you for having one or two men on the panel.
So I would like to invite Olivia Osborne, who is was a postdoc at UCLA studying and working with nanotoxicology, and as a scientist also working with artists, and this slide is like, anyway, Olivia.
Well, first of all, again, thank you ever so much for inviting me here. It's always a pleasure not only to talk about my work, which is science, but my other passion, which is art. And thank you ever so much for Victoria for inviting me. Do we have... Okay, so my work actually is to do with nanotoxicology and the environment, but my research as a whole has been ecotoxicology, which is the environmental effects as a whole of chemicals. But my word of the environment isn't just about mountains and rivers. It's actually the medium that surrounds us, which is actually the true definition. And my passion really is to disseminate my research. And as Jim said, I feel that the reason why people always don't understand something, that's when they don't believe in it, and it's something that I talk about a lot. So what I try to do with my work is I try to put an emotional connection to it, and that's actually what I have in the gallery down the road. When we talk about climate change and glaciers, that's so far away from us, people sometimes don't seem to have a connection with them. Oh, it's Antarctica, nothing to do with me. But when you tie a connection to it, an emotion to it, people start to think, oh, wait, I actually can relate to that. That might affect me. And that's what I tried to do in that body of work with the glaciers. So we actually did a time lapse, but I actually made sure that people understood that the glaciers were like human hearts. Now, being British, everyone thinks that I don't have a heart. So this was also part of the project. But as I then made sure that people had that emotional connection with the heart, as the heart melts, like you know, or some of you may know, when someone touches you in that kind of way, emotionally, you feel something. So those glaciers feel something when they melt, and that's a representation of the glaciers. But as a whole, what I wanted to do really here at Ars Electronica, because we don't have a lot of time, is the reason why people don't believe, let's say, in climate change is because they simply don't understand it. And I cannot stress enough that if we don't understand something, we cannot believe in it and we cannot see it. So I think that research institutions in particular, and UCLA is a prime example of that, is we have to start disseminating our research in a completely different way, which is why I was so fortunate enough to be able to find something like the Art Sci Collective in UCLA, because I was able to process my research and present it in a completely different way. And already I'm getting so much different feedback in terms of how people seem to understand my papers, my journals, and I think that will be very important in the future. Let's start presenting science in a completely different way, not by making it too simple for people to say, oh, you're degrading the science. Let's make it more available, let's make it more visually impactful, and this way we can start making a change for better. Thank you very much.
It's like women like this that are the climate change. And the next person I'd like to introduce is Rita Blaik. Rita has been part of the Art Sci Collective for 5-6 years, and she got her PhD in material science. So Rita will say a few words.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you, Xin Xin, and thank you to Ars Electronica and everyone who, and thank you to CNSI, the California Nanosystems Institute, who sponsored me coming here, and to everyone else who's made this whole event possible. I echo the previous sentiments of how inspiring it has been to hear everyone else who has previously come up here to speak. So it's truly an honor to get to say a few words myself as well. You will hear, I think, some very similar words to what you just heard from Olivia, because I also have a similar kind of background and experience of having the goal as a scientist of being able to communicate things that I get to learn and understand as a scientist in ways that are visually compelling, emotionally compelling, and get to people in a different way and might reach them in a different way than, say, a paper or a news release about something might. It's interesting also, as Jim was talking about, or James Gimzewski was talking about, why people do or do not believe certain things. There's also an interesting trend I've noticed, even within the sciences, where people do or do not believe in topics like climate change and feminism based off of different backgrounds that they come from, politically, socially, religiously. So even in the sciences, you get this sort of interesting bifurcation of belief that can be very, very difficult to penetrate. And even art can be a challenging medium to do this with. And I think it's really only until people experience something very, very personal and are forced to confront something in that way that we might be able to change their minds. So I don't know if my piece in the show will change anyone's minds about climate change, but I hope at least it gets people to think and maybe think about it in a personal way. Just to give a brief I guess, statement about my work in the show. So my piece is called Tyndall Landscapes, which looks at sunsets and creates them artificially in liquid form, because the same phenomenon that allows sunsets to occur in the sky, which is light scattering due to nanoparticles in the air, can also happen in liquid form. So by creating these sunset sculptures, it allows people to sort of view them on a sort of smaller and closer scale. But it also reflects on this idea that these particles that are in the air are often particles that are bad for us, particles that come from carbon emissions, come from soot, from dust, from things that are not good for us that we produce. So there's a bit of irony in the fact that these things that are so beautiful and lovely and we think are from nature are actually often not from nature and are quite man-made. So the goal is to have people kind of reflect on this, and I think it's especially timely now since it seems like a lot of America is currently on fire, both literally and politically. So, especially California and Los Angeles, where I'm from. So I hope that if you get to go and see the show, you might take a moment to think about the climate and think about what's in the air, both politically and literally, and reflect on this as you reflect on the sunset, both here and I guess outside tonight. Thank you.
I'm wondering if Byron Rich is here? No. Yeah. Would you say a few words as a transition to David Familian? Byron collaborates and works with Mary Maggic, so he's our other honorary male.
Well, I had a plan for this, but I totally decided at the last minute to ditch that plan and talk about something else. So I'm going to be looking at my phone once in a while because I was taking a couple notes and thinking about this quite a bit. More or less, I want to talk a little bit about higher education. I'm a professor in the United States, and I'm actually originally from Canada. So what I want to talk about a little bit is how I'm the product of a deeply flawed system. So that's what I'm going to get into. More or less what I want to chat about fundamentally is that making this more of like a charge to those that believe that somehow complacency is neutral. Like complacency, whether you're in higher ed, complacency and kind of not ruffling feathers around issues of equality, whether it's racial or gender or whatever the case may be, that in itself, that complacency is a violent act. As I said, I was produced by a flawed education system. I wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say that I was ever sexist, but I definitely wasn't a feminist as a young man. I just didn't really get it. I never thought about it. I didn't need to think about it. I was guilty via ignorance and complacence. Even the foundations of open source estrogen, which I work with on Mary, were rooted in this ignorance. When I started this project as a grad student in 2011, I had just moved to the United States, and as some of you have already heard, when I moved there, my girlfriend mentioned that she needed to go get a birth control prescription filled. And I was like, okay, whatever, you know, it's going to be super cheap. You just go to the pharmacy, no big deal. I didn't realize the institutional barriers that exist in a place like the United States. So I was coming at it from this like real heteronormative male perspective that just believed, oh, everything's fine, you know? So I wasn't actively being sexist, but I was definitely being violent in a way by my complacency and my neutrality on such a complicated issue. I didn't understand the issue very well when I first started working with Mary on this, and it was only through some really deep critique and a really great critique by professors that I had in graduate school that I really started to realize what a privileged position I had grown up in, with a mother who was, at the same time as raising us, got multiple degrees and was an executive with the health system. I just thought, this is how it is, you know, everything's great in the world. Completely ignorant. 2 years ago, there was a guy named Tim Hunt, a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, who made the comment that all the women in his lab just fall in love with him. So he doesn't want to have any women in the lab. Does anybody else remember this? Yeah. And, you know, that is obviously absolute bullshit. Like, the lab is fundamentally, laboratories are fundamentally sexist and hierarchical. And, you know, inducing fear in your colleagues or in those that are below you, students or whatever it is not the same as consent, obviously, you know? But apparently this isn't that obvious. And it perpetuates, like, laboratory spaces all around the world, but definitely in the United States of America. Last week I was in a faculty meeting with all the other faculty in my entire college, and one of the new scientists, new professors, was being introduced. He had just come off a year where he was taking care of his children, and his wife was working at the university. One of the other scientists made the comment of like, "Oh, you're coming back," like in the faculty meeting, being introduced, saying, more or less said, "It's good that you finally got a real job again." And this was right at a moment when his wife was actually going to take care of the children for 1 year. So at once, he totally denigrated the year that this man had taken off to raise his children, which is obviously super valuable, but at the same time, like, posited this deeply sexist attitude in front of all the faculty, hundreds of professors. Nobody in any position of power stood up to that in this department or in this full faculty meeting. And, you know, again, I was also complacent. And so if I'm trying to get across anything, it's that complacency is an act of violence also. You know, those of us, myself as like a white male professor at a college, I get put on hiring committees at a ridiculous rate. And when you're in those types of positions, you got to act not from a place of complacence, you know? So I know everybody in here is a feminist and what have you, but there's probably people in here also that, like myself, need to readdress their own complacence within their institutions or within their workplaces to try to combat what a flawed system it is. There's just a couple more things. Annie mentioned earlier, I'll get off the stage. Annie mentioned something that was super profound earlier about the Cyborg Manifesto. That was exactly my experience, what she said, how the cyborg was taught to me as being the fundamental element of that book. It wasn't until 2 years ago when I was actually teaching it that a student said to me, "Why are we focusing so much on the cyborg, not on the feminist fundamentals that underpin this?" So anyway, if this is anything, it's a charge to those of you that feel as though your complacence is somehow not hurting. It is hurting. It's a violent act in and of itself. Thank you very much. I got to get off the stage.
I'd like to introduce David Famillion, who is the art director of the Beale Gallery of Art and Technology, and very much proactively is working with Art and Science Project and brings in artists like we've seen, many of whom we've seen, to talk about the last exhibition that he had, male-female.
Actually, what I tend to do, I do misread sometimes when Victoria sends me stuff. So I thought I was talking about the next one, and I decided I wasn't going to do that. I was going to talk about masculine, feminine. But I want to say, in relation to something Jim said, is I'm a little younger than Jim. And to me, feminism, from my viewpoint, is just listening to women, and that's to me the most important way of maybe what Byron was saying, is that is the way you gain it without trying to superimpose your viewpoint on it. In relation to the masculine feminine show, what's important to contextualize it is the previous show was called Embodiment, and it was about a traditional approach to what we see at Ars, which is defined as embodiment, and interactive work of sorts, of differing types. I also do, when I do a group show, I don't have just new media or expanded media. I have other traditional forms of media. And as I was thinking about that exhibition and what would be the mirror of that, I tried to think about what I would do, what is a different response. And at some point I go, well, what about masculine, feminine as an embodied experience? Not as a polemic of politics, but just how do artists express their own gender in their work, and then how is it received by the audience? And it was really about creating a conversation within the space, that the artworks would generate a conversation. And I think, especially in the opening and other venues, that's exactly what seemed to happen. And people brought in their own viewpoint, because the works were so a wide range, from Castle's work, of which is they body built and took hormones of their body and literally sculpted their body, and you saw a grid of as their body changed. And or Victoria's Bodies Incorporated, which was a piece in the 90s where you got to design your own body, or a 5-foot vulva made out of crystal. It really it allowed me both to balance, made it very easy to balance the show gender-wise, and also just watch what happens when there isn't this polemic involved and people bring their own viewpoints. So that, and it was so I don't know how it's going to influence my curating in the future, but it definitely makes me rethink the whole paradigm as being, when you call yourself a media curator, and what you think interactivity is, and how, and we actually use the word embodiment or in that, and how embodied can it be if it's just, you know, moving your body and there's a response from a screen or something. So I really am looking to see how these two shows will affect my curating in the future. And I'm going to be short, so thank you.
Is Satinder here? Satinder Gill? Satinder comes to us from Cambridge, and she writes a lot about embodiment and interactive arts, and I was very happy that she came from Cambridge to say a few words. So give a welcome to Satinder.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I actually feel quite humbled here. Some amazing work done by some amazing women and people, and my interest, I suppose, here is I work on how it is that we tacitly connect with each other, tacit engagement. And my work has always been driven by the idea that what we know is fundamentally embodied. And I tend not to think in terms of individuals, but in terms of, in making sense of each other, we make sense when we have these points of connection, moments of connection. I work currently with musicians because I'm trying to understand the temporality of this connectivity. I think that somebody here spoke about sound, and music And dance allows us to think beyond words. Words sometimes trap us in transaction, but when we move together, it allows a release of connection at a very fundamentally relational level. And I think that all of you here who work in arts, you deeply understand this aspect of the relational. And it would be lovely for, it's really heartening to see all this connection between academia and the arts. Sorry, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts on this. I suppose I just would say that I'm a little bit stuck. I think that just because I feel that I'm speaking outside of the domain I'm used to, at the heart of my work, I look at rhythm. So maybe you can help me, Victoria. I think basically what I want to say is that so much of work in looking at communication, in psychology, in the various academic domains, we talk about the individual so much, we look at the person. But what I'm finding is that when we actually grasp something or understand something, we're not on our own when we're doing it. It's not about the individual, it's about, if I move my body with yours, it's in that moment that we create something new.
Okay, that's why we hug.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. I actually really was touched by those moments of silence and kind of reflection. Alla Mitrofanova is, well, now second-year grad student in design media arts, and she truly embodies environmentalism and feminism and embodiment. So say a few words, Ellie. We have 2 more people and then we'll take a short break.
Hello, I am also very surprised and inspired to be here. I might have a few moments of silence on my own because I just did a brain wave hackathon and I have not really slept very well. What do I want to speak about? I guess ice, right. The work that I've been doing in the last year has been these organic ice sculptures made of all kinds of natural materials that disintegrate in time, and as they come out of the freezer, I do these 3D scans of them and then produce these types of interactions in an installation context where as the ice disintegrates, it starts to influence the 3D model. That's so weird that I'm up there. And can't do it. So anyway, that's one part of my work. That's one part of my work, and another aspect of it deals with the idea of the virtualization of memory and how that relates to the research that's being done at the neurophysics labs at UCLA, where they're studying how virtual reality and environments that are in a memory space are connected to the actual physical landscape. And I still haven't figured out how to connect the 2 works, but I'm very fascinated by the collaborational approaches and aesthetics between art and science.
Last but not least, in this part is Haytham Nabar. Haytham, come on up. Haytham is a media artist from Egypt. And he's actually coming to the Ars Center in October to spend his sabbatical there. So you give us the last word in this section.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Victoria, for inviting me to come here and just give a few words. And as Victoria just mentioned, that I am an artist, designer also, educator. I teach in the American University in Cairo. But my contribution, which I will not really talk as an artist, but as an organizer or a founder of Electronica, which is a festival for new media, arts, and electronic arts. And as you know, some shocking facts about Egypt, that we have, let's say we are number 3 in the countries which like sexual harassment take place. So number 3 all over the world is Egypt. And 99.3, if I'm correct, from all Egyptian women have been harassed. And it's really difficult to explain and to talk about, but at least I will give just a little bit of a positive line about this fact, which is in Electronica, which took place last year, 2016, we are proudly that we have 34% of our artists are women. And that's comparing to what I'm just giving you as a percentage of what's happening to the women in the Egyptian streets is really big. So we still encourage young artists and also academics like educators and students to work on new media, and that will be our way how to express freedom of expression through the art and using technology and science as a medium. Thank you.
So I hope that this gave you a little flavor about feminist climate change beyond the binary. We really are trying to diversify the idea of feminism, and we think that now would be a good time to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to have a number of other fabulous people come to say a few words and some discussion, and we want to include you, of course. So thank you for patience, for being here, and don't go away.
So we go sit next to each other.
Yes. So Diane Arellano. Are you Diane? Hi, I'm Victoria. Nice to meet you too. And Ine Gevers. Is Ine here? Waltraud Grossgruber from Tricky Women. Genevieve Ruckert. Oh, you're here, great. Awesome. I was starting to wonder. Oh, nice to meet you. Welcome.
Sitting.
Yes. So you guys, you'll be sitting. So Rosa Bonsuas.
Elizabeth Chimana.
She should come up too. Elizabeth, come on up. So, Victoria. Should we invite them to come up? The faces? So we just leave them on the stage. Yes, and if you got it. We're ready to start?
Check with technicians whether they're all done.
So we start?
Still we are waiting one from
Okay. So let me tell them. So what we're going to do, since there's little time, is if you could do rapid fire pitch it, which is real quick of your initiative and your main goal of what you're doing, and then we can have at least a little time for discussion. Does that sound good? If we run over, then we'll be around. Yes, the initiatives and the practices and how you're encouraging more than and we create this programs or curating everything. So if we can go really quick, then there's a canvas back. How's that? A lot of different things, and that's a cool thing.
Allow individuals also.
You want visuals too? I think. Okay. So the visuals, everybody's submitted their visuals. So I'm going to follow that. Yes, and then one by one they'll come.
We got only 6 slides.
Well, whichever ones we have. And so how do we do that?
Well,
I can look at this without it being on
yeah,
let's
the
look at it.
name.
Can I just see what it is? Let's see which one we start with.
It's from Diana.
And it's one slide.
Let me see.
She wants,
Yes.
okay, so that's perfect slide to begin with.
Okay. Then I laid it.
Oh, no, actually, sorry, Genevieve. I think we should sorry. Okay. So we start with Genevieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that her slide?
Yeah.
Genevieve, we start with you. Just so you know. It's a good thing. We're going to keep going. Talk about diversity of points of views and practices and initiatives. I find it really empowering to watch and listen to everything in the entire spectrum of what we're seeing. It's really marvelous, and it needs to come to light more. So having it all in one place is just fantastic, and we're going to continue in a very quick, rapid-fire way, and hopefully have enough time to have a discussion where we can include you. So we should start with Genevieve, who's a curator here at the OCA Center. And how amazing is that place? Please welcome Genevieve. Do you want to come here and show your slide? So when you're giving your quick, maybe here is good.
Is it already? Yeah, I think because I'm the curator here, I'm also invited. And moreover, since we are doing the show of the winners of the Prix Ars Electronica for 20 years now, and of course, how female artists are represented not only in media arts, but in fine arts is, of course, a big question. I think it's a duty to find, especially for thematic works, to do good research, not only Googling. So in times of internet, to really find interesting aspects. A lot changed in the last 20 years, a lot changed about technology, that it's not only technique driven and we are interested what kind of aesthetics technique do, but it's much more about concept, and I think this is something females are really good in. For us it's really something important, and I hope you enjoyed the show, and I look forward to our discussion. And my image did not appear because I wanted to show you something.
There it is.
A super old art piece from 1994. It was done by the Canadian media artist Vera Frankel. We did a lot of production pieces, and you can see OK Center as it was in former days. And what she did is kind of a quite intense research on the history of the city, which was one of Hitler's favorite towns, and he planned to establish an art museum here. And what she did is, with media art tools in the middle of the 90s, to really kind of create an intense narration, what have happened to the art pieces and where did they go to and what kind of future it would have been. So far, I think we're many.
Oh, is that it? Yeah, so the building where the Feminist Climate Change is apparently was designed, or Hitler designed with architect, and I kind of enjoy thinking of him turning in his grave. Diane Arellano, artist and software developer from Peru and Venezuela, both?
Both, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yes. Okay. Well, yes, my name is Diana Arellano, and I well, this is a long story. I was born in Peru, grew up in Venezuela, went to do my PhD in Spain, and now I'm happy in Germany, in Stuttgart. I work at the Film Academy Baden-Württemberg, and there I am a research associate and also software developer. And my work is really mostly related with emotions and virtual characters, and it's the idea that we have there in our research and development facility at the Film Academy is to create more engaging virtual characters for different kinds of applications. And one of those is for autism. So we try, or my work really tries to bring all the beauty and usefulness of animation into other things that are not just entertainment, like animated movies or so, but also for social applications, like helping autistic kids to recognize emotions in other people. When I'm not at the Film Academy, I am really happy to contribute with the FMX team. The FMX is one of the biggest conferences in animation, visual effects, games, and transmedia in Europe. It happens every May in Stuttgart, and there 3 years ago I started with my colleague Marie Ketcha to think about the possibility of opening a space for women in visual arts. Because we realized that given such a huge attendance of people coming to Stuttgart to talk about animation, films, movie productions, business, and so on, there was missing this part of women there. And what we wanted to do was open this space to really give a voice and to tell people, look, we are here and this is what we do. And this is the image up there is from our last panel that I moderated and co-curated with Marie. And we had the opportunity to have Gerfried Stocker there talking about the database on women in media arts. And it was mostly about activism, and it was very similar to probably what we are going to do today. Besides that, I'm also part of the ACMC graph. That is the special interest group on computer graphics. My background is computer graphics, computer science. And I belong to this organization, and I'm chair of a committee that is called International Resources. And there, for the past 4 years, have been running a session called Women in CG, Women in Computer Graphics. And the idea is that we really bring into a male-dominated environment a group of women who are working in animation and computer graphics, and tell them, look, this is the place where we can really discuss our ideas, we can really fight the imposter syndrome if we have it, we can really find role models, and we can really share our experiences in a friendly environment. And besides that, I try to participate in other places or in other activities. And I just put some images of platforms that are out there and I have some relation with. And mentorship is also something very important that probably we will talk more about it later. Thank you.
So Ine Gevers from Netherlands, yes. Did you have a slide as well? Yes. Okay.
Let me see if I... Maybe you didn't... Well, okay. I don't see the slide, that's too bad. Thank you for having me here. I'm Ine Gevers, as you could see, curator, writer and activist, and in that sense very obliged to feminism as my root, but also the start of actually everything that I've been doing as a curator. I have founded a foundation called Niet Normaal. Actually, you cannot translate it into English. You can a bit translate it into German, which is Nicht Normaal. And it's a very playful title, and it of course plays with questions like what is normal and who decides, what is natural and who or what decides, etc. The project I'm working on now is called Robot Love. That's perhaps also why I'm asked here. It's a humanities approach towards robotics and artificial intelligence, looking at robotics and artificial intelligence as actually the context that also kind of, challenges us to rethink who we are becoming with others. Thank you.
Waltra Grausgruber from Tricky Women. Come.
I have it at the end. No, this one. Hello, I'm one of the 2 directors of Tricky Women Animation Film Festival. We are the only festival in the world that focuses on animated films made by women. We take place every year in March around the Women's Day. We screen about 170 or 180 films, mainly shorts. You can get an up-to-date overview about the female production around the world. But we are not only a festival, we see us as a platform for animation. We cooperate not only with museums like the Albertina Museum or the Freud Museum in Vienna or the Foreign Ministry or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so we send out in the whole world films made in Austria. We also cooperate with women activism organizations. We screen, we try to get the films to the organizations that need them, organizations that work with women trade victims or women's houses, but we also present entertaining films, so we screen everything, not everything, we select films. We try to give an overview of the year's production made by women in the world. We want to make to change the imbalance in film or media industry, to put women on stage. Yes, I think that's the main thing. And our, how do I have to press there? So it's just like this, yeah. So our call is running at the moment. So if you have made a film and you're a female director, you can send it to us. But you also can apply if you made a co-production with a man, but women have to be in the leading positions. And if you're a group, more than 50% have to be in the directing position. So we are looking forward to your applications. Thanks.
And Elizabeth Shimano.
Do we have the image?
You should tell me which one it is.
I don't see it.
Ah, there it is. That's it? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Shimano. I'm composer and doing electronic music since quite a long time. And because I'm running a little institution called IMA, Institute of Media Archaeology. I founded in 2005. And because in all my education, I never got not even one little information about women in electronic music, I started to ask myself if this is true or if there is just information missing. And so I started to do research myself in the 90s. And now with IMA, we have one slot, which is called IMA Fiction. And we do video portraits of female artists with a focus on sound. And this is portrait number 9. It's in progress. It will be presented in November. Beatriz Ferreira, pioneer of electroacoustic music from Argentina, but actually then moved to France and was very much connected with the CRM. And yes, we do always one Austrian, one international artist. And I have cards, and who is interested, please take a card, and all our portraits are online, and watch it.
And then Beatrix from Femtech, Beatrice Hausner. I'm on your list.
Which slide? Yes, I do. We sent it Wednesday, but however. Okay, thank you for the invitation. My name is Beatrix Hausner, and I work as a gender expert at the Austrian Society of Environment and Technology. So there is again, combination between gender and environmental topics. And now I would like to present in a few words, thank you, just the initiative Femtech. Femtech was founded already in 2003 by the Austrian Federal Ministry of Transport, Innovation and Technology to promote women in research and technology. And we do manage these activities out of Femtech already since 2005. And the heart of this initiative is a database on female experts, as you have at the Ars Electronica. And now there are already more than 1,900 women are registered on this database in over more than 100 specifies. And we promote this database every 6 months to different conference organizers, to the media, to any companies, to promote the career of these women. And out of this database, we nominate every month 3 experts and like a jury, independent jury, chooses one expert, one Femtech Experts of the Month, which is an award. And we offer the the Femtech Expert of the Month, like promotion, like a press release, also a video, like a video interview to present themselves, their work and their career, and also like press photos to promote women. And for this month, September, the first time, yes, we nominated women in media arts. We do have a cooperation with the Ars Electronica. I want to thank Victoria Bös from the Ars Electronica for this cooperation. Thank you. Because she helped me to find women in media arts. And I think the recent Femtech Expert of the Month is in the audience. It's Katrin Sturmreich. Congratulations. So this will be a crossover project between technology and arts, I would say like this.
We have Rosa von Suez. I think I pronounced that.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Rosa von Suez. I'm a senior researcher at the University for Applied Science, and I also the deputy director of one of the largest media technology academic program in Austria, media technology, and we have in the last 10 years 40 to 45 of our students are female. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here, and I want to present. Can I have the? Oh, sorry, it's automatically. As a member of the national and biannual Marianne von Willemer Award for Digital Media, I want to briefly summarize the aspects of the success of that prize. It's not a lot I want to tell you, but I feel more comfortable if I have the notes here, so don't blame me about that. This prize is a direct prize money support for female artists or artist groups. And it's awarded only to women who works with digital media in an artist with technology as an artistic tool. So the one point, key point why this award is very successful is the fact that this is a political statement to have those kinds of prizes, because by awarding female productions, the evidence of the unequal opportunities in means and power for women can be shown. And this is this awareness of these unequal opportunities, even in this it's a very young discipline, shows that this is necessary. So the second one is, of course, and it's even in every prize the same, the quality and the amount of the contributions. The Marianne von Willemer Award for Digital Media in his sixth call has already had 150 contributions. It's a national prize, and it's an initiative from the Office of Women Issues of the city of Linz. So it's regional based, but the list of artists mirrors the who is who of the female Austrian digital art. This is great database. And the criteria that the work may not be awarded elsewhere shows outstanding and state-of-the-art female production, this from a jury point of view. The third very important success is the network around the prize. This is on the one hand the Kunstuniversität Linz with its Dorf TV, it's over there, they do the streaming here. This is an open channel, and the Kunstuniversität Linz and the Ars Electronica are partners to that Marianne von Willemer Award, and they guarantee more media present. They guarantee the fact that the award winner's work is presented in the Ars Electronica in the context of exhibition. And the last key factor of the success of this prize is that the award is open for a wide and also interdisciplinary range of digital art, coding art, net art, digital photography, media performances, participatory media process. So no restriction and no further disciplinary frontiers within this digital art. And I summarize, along there is no quota for public funding or grant. We definitely need those wonderful prizes. Thank you very much.
And last but not least is Eveline van der Vogt from the Austrian Academy of Sciences. So we're back to climate change.
So I'm Eveline van der Vogt from the Austrian Academy of Sciences, Austrian Center for Digital Humanities. And I'm working there as a knowledge designer, network facilitator, and working in the fields of research infrastructures, actually. So I'm very much ambassador for open innovation in science and open science in general. And what we are trying to do is, from a human-centered approach, to open up or support and facilitate and create networks and collaborations and support and facilitate co-creation and between artists, between researchers, and between actually different groups and actors in society. So thinking beyond, let's say, just the research community that is given. What we have done so far as well is we have established a movement, I would call it a movement more than a project or whatever, on an open innovation research infrastructure, where we are considering or visionizing with virtual and liquid laboratories on the one hand, and on the other hand with physical laboratories that are interacting and that are much more related to the needs that are coming up from the actors that are following, let's say, a certain topic, to call it like that. And what we are aiming to do with that is to come up much more, or to support and empower much more creativity and innovation processes, and connecting as well researchers or single actors on the one hand with a group that is establishing these and supporting these networks. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Image that we didn't see.
You didn't see the image.
There it is. Did you want to talk about this for a second?
So that's just the image to show it a little bit.
Just an image.
That's just the image. It's nothing special to say to the image itself. Yes, it's probably, we could say, the image. That is why I've chosen the Mona Lisa, to make the invisible visible, and to actually think a little bit more about, especially in co-creation processes and related to diversity, who are the people that are usually not seen when a product is finished and given. Thank you very much.
So I would like to open it now to the audience to ask questions. And anybody want to start? Come on, there's got to be a question. There we go. I think just the microphone here to Diane.
Thanks for all the very informative presentations and lots of things going on. In a way, like, I think it's a lot, and it's not a lot of time for a conversation, but one of the things that I think about is, like, okay, Faces, we're doing this for 20 years. There are other initiatives that exist much longer. I remember doing something in Vienna in a group celebrating 100 years of a women's art space. And I'm pretty sure that those women 100 years ago were not at all thinking that 100 years later there would still be a group of women sitting in that room thinking about, what are we going to do? How can we get women into art? So my question is, despite this like long history of women doing exactly the types of things that we're all doing, myself included, like what would you say is because what is the reason why we still have to do these things? Why are we still all doing these things? And speaking to the core. And speaking to the core? To ourselves, yeah.
You mean we're speaking to the converted, preaching to the converted? Right.
We're all busy. We're all in it. We're all complicit. Yeah.
Okay. So, anybody wants to address that?
Is it on? Is it on? Yes.
Yes.
Well, I ask that question every time I prepare a panel on women in computer graphics or in visual arts, because I think it's when you see the history of what women have been fighting for and what we are still struggling with. I come not from the art side, even though it says artist, but I am a computer scientist. And now that I have the opportunity to work in animation, I thought, well, people in animation have it easy. You know, there are more women and there is a more artistic space. Probably the problem doesn't happen there like it happens in computer science, where sometimes you are the only woman in a group of researchers or computer scientists. And I realized it's the same thing happening. So maybe what I have noticed, I mean, you have been doing this for 20 years, I have been doing it for 4, but what I have noticed these 4 years, and probably you can tell me more about it, is that women fight all the time with themselves, and that's what, I don't know if that's what you meant with talking to the core. Every time we have a discussion comes always the same topic. Women are not confident enough to stand up and to do the work that other people want to do. And that's been some feedback that I have received from people we have been discussing to, because at the end, probably it's also that we address a younger generation. That could be something that maybe has some influence. I'm not saying that is the only reason, that is only what I have noticed. And probably it's something that women face in every generation, the same wall. And every generation you need to have some support or some group or something that tells them or tells us that we can do that, that we are encouraged and that we are motivated. So maybe it's a generational thing, but maybe that's one thing, I don't know.
So when I compare, let's say, the last 30 years, I see change. I definitely, so it's not that I do now the same than 30 years ago. Because 30 years ago, definitely, I was more or less the only woman, at least in Austria, in this environment of electronic music, maybe 2 or 3 others. And this definitely somehow changed. What still, so we have more and more women doing sound art, doing electronic music. We have what Annie said, female pressure, which is dedicated more to the DJ and club stuff, but things are going on and things are developing. And of what the best thing is, my perception changed because I was so much involved to look what happened around me. And I think this is a very important thing, and not only for us. That's why IMA always has this, also on our board. There are 2 board members here, Eva and Uschi, but we always have men in, because it's also their history. They also need to participate. We need to make them to participate in these processes, and this is working. So at IMA, I can say it somehow is working, and it changed our perception of the people around us. And yeah, but still, it's a lot to do. But it's changing, I have to say.
I want to admit that science will help and data will help, because if we know that from 100 feature films in German TV and 90 are directed or produced or written by male, then this makes an effect, because we want to see more different perspective. If you see the Swedish model of a quota, then you can see now this year we have at the Biennale in Berlin, 60% of all the Swedish films are from female directors. So data really could help to show, and that's the reason why all these initiatives are very necessary to show up. Yeah, there is female art, there are good works, so there's quality. So science and data.
Just one little thing to what is really a problem is education.
Exactly.
Still, the books don't change. Right. We have to change the education. The books people read in school. That's really important. We need to change education.
Yeah, because we have data in the environmental sciences, and there's deniers and all kinds of politics against it. So the data itself will not change. It's really contextualization and education. I agree 100%. Yeah.
My experience is when I go somewhere in the world, it's already, because there's always the question, does it need a festival that focuses only on women? But if I go to Norway or to China, it's very emotional everywhere where we turn up. So this topic, it's really filled with emotion. So I think it's really worth doing it because people are not aware how is the situation. So it's really fine that now, for example, the Austrian Film Institute collects the data and they have a look how much of the funding is going to women. They are not only counting the heads, how many female directors got money, but how many of the complete percentage of the budget they got. And so now we have support that we can say it is really like this. It's not that we say women get less or women don't get the key positions. So, but I think it's changing. I have 3 kids, and the youngest one really is a job, searching for a job now, and she is really applying at jobs where she fulfills 50%. You know, so I think the world is changing because they always say men apply if they fulfill 80% of the criteria. I think we have to, my other experience that they sometimes say there are no women that can do the job, but for this reason the databases are so important. But we did one music project and they said there are no composers, but there are a lot of composers. But really the first things in mind are coming the men, and then we say when we do our events, we need women, we have men, but not so many, but first we have a look if there's a woman, and normally the men turn up the first, and then we say, no, we want to invite a man, and then they turn up. So it's a process like this, and we need the stories made by women. I think moving image influences our society, so we need the stories of women, and that's one thing at our festival. In the jury, people come and say, why do we do this focus? And we have a female jury, and after this experience in the jury, they say, now we know why you do this, because we enjoyed the discussion, and so it's, these little things are so important. That's what I want to say here.
Well, what to say new, but my experience is the same. We set up this database because people said we wanted to hire a woman, we wanted to have a female expert as a speaker, but there is no one, we can't find one. And this is now 17 years ago, yeah? But still nowadays, sometimes people say, yeah, we wanted to have a woman for this job, but we couldn't find one, yeah? And the point is, people, they have to have a look in this kind of database, or they have to research, and it takes more time, and they really have to want it, they really have to do it, and sometimes you have to force them nearly to do that, yeah? But then it works, but yeah, there is still, when I look at a conference in natural science or technical science, there is still a lot of men and just a few women presenting and also in the audience. Therefore, we still run these initiatives.
Although, of course, now what I would like to say is I think it's necessary to have many, many different strategies and tactics alongside each other. So the quotums, etc., is very important, but I also think each time in each new development, awareness and, you know, the perception is really important. Also to do it in a playful manner, you know, so not only like what was just said, you know, preaching for your own parochial, but the playfulness in this all, because it's so much more joyful to talk to each other across differences. And I'm not only talking about women and male, but across so many differences and also across species. And that's so much more fun than only like looking at our own, how do you say that, navel?
Yeah,
navel.
exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Belly button.
I would like just to add something. I think it's wonderful to have initiatives which have still something like a pole position to bring things further for female artists, for female scientists. But still, there should be an awareness in institutions themselves. This is the most important.
Yes.
So if we start a research, of course, if we do a panel or an exhibition, whatever, we are looking for females, participants. Sometimes it takes a bit longer, but it's an intense and it's a more challenging process. And I absolutely agree with you. It's not about females, males, and all other gender issues, because there are much more differences, but we have to be quite aware of all these implications. And there's only one thing we should take care of. Sometimes in specific context, things are already selected, like you have to take a dog of every village. But we have to find the strongest things. The strongest, impressive, sensitive, talking experience we can find. And I think it's a duty to do this. Yes. And for me, as the curator of this institution, which is led by a male for 25 years now, it was always part of how we curate things, that it's absolutely necessary to involve artists and female artists. And I think it should be normal. So also, men should be feminists, not only women.
No, I have the feeling I should say something.
Absolutely.
Frankly spoken.
The last word.
Yeah. No, it's how we try to address that, or I try to address that, actually is a little bit into that direction, and that's what I would call infrastructures, or what I think about infrastructures. There are such a lot of small pieces are going on. I mean, not small in amount, but one person or some persons together, but that would not do a societal change like we have heard today, and I think much more about that as well. If it's just a single person or a small group or a group of people, that would not really have the big societal impact. If you will have this societal impact, you have to kind of bring people together that are pursuing something, and then you have to bring together as well initiatives and databases that are working together, and a little bit that's as well related to the visibility. It's often that that female researchers and actors are in positions where they're probably less seen and visible, and that is why they are then not easily to be found, let's say, by the internet or so on. So it is quite relevant to make that visible and see, well, actually this person has contributed very often in the process already and is a predictor already. So you could, in making visible what are the, let's say, what's the knowledge and actually the expertise of a person, much more, and probably not related to ontologies that are already given or fostered by let's say, much more a male or an old societal concept. We could probably make visible things that are more relevant right now. And that would be what I would like to do with infrastructures.
Okay. So I would, yes, Haitham, there's a microphone.
I just wanted to add a very small, let's say, just concern. Not really a concern, but I just want to say it's happening, and not really in the north as here in Austria we are talking, but also happening in Egypt, which is more south and more challenging from different aspects, political, socio-political and cultural challenges. But, and I agree, there was already men, there are feminists more than females, especially in Egypt. And again, I said it's working as an initiative as Ars Electronica. As I said, we are now 34% of the participants are females. And also from my position as an educator at the American University in Cairo, we have more than 80% of my students are females. And that's in Egypt, which is, again, more a completely different dimension of challenges.
But the case everywhere in the schools are the students, the female students, but afterwards you don't find them. Where do they go? That's more than 60%. Rosa says everywhere the students are female, but afterwards they don't get their jobs for these reasons. Maybe I don't want to start the discussion of quota, but.
I know that the statistics around the world, it's all the same in all art schools. Mostly they are females, but again,
art schools, art history. Yeah.
I know, but
no,
yeah,
knows.
But at least what I wanted to say is, I mean, I don't do everything alone by myself, but there is platforms for them to express their own. Challenges. So if I have Ars Electronica and they come, and the many other initiatives in Egypt have the same, so they can actually go outside, they can express at least as an artist, and I teach design, I don't teach art, and they go and work, and they have opportunities. And again, it's a completely different dimension of a challenge. It's very difficult in Egypt. I just give the statistics of how it is the sexual harassment in Egypt. It's different dimension, but still, I think it's working. And of course, I cannot give, as 30 years ago, how it was in Egypt, but at least I read and I know the statistics, and it was really very difficult. And if I look at the fine art, we have already like percentage of less than 10% of the artists are females and 90% are males. But now it's completely different. That's just, I see it as just a hope in globally and also in Egypt. Thank you.
So just to end, I guess back to climate change a little bit, I think a lot of it is about who controls and manages the data and the infrastructure. For instance, the Environmental Protection Agency, which was very active during the last administration in the United States. We had a kind of a marathon trying to save that information before it was taken off and deleted. James Gimzewski, who was talking earlier, actually was teaching environmental science, and he went to check some data and it wasn't there. And so that's a very cautionary note to really think about how that data is moved around and who controls it. So you can get somebody saying, oh, we should have more women and do the quota, et cetera, but then who enacts that, and how is it enacted, and how does it become part of the actual infrastructure? This is what education can do, where we can get more and more people to be conscious of their power and more conscious of the networks. I'm very hopeful with the young guys that I presented earlier. I think they're very much using the kind of basis of what the FACES group set up as a kind of thinking of alternative networks and alternative ways to build infrastructures. And then to just end on a hopeful note, I'm very excited and have been interested in the idea of self-organized criticality and how something can start from one point and then build up to, let's say, a cloud, and it goes into rain, or it starts with one person and then it becomes a crowd or a movement, and it just shifts and changes everything. So on a hopeful note, I feel by listening to all the different initiatives, all the different people who presented today, quite a few, I think 30, 40 people presented, there's hope, right? But it's really a tough time. It's a really tough time, and we have to be cognizant of that and just keep pushing away and trying to educate more and more teachers. So people who you educate should become teachers, and then just kind of propagate it until it self-organizes into a hurricane. Anyway, thank you guys. That was a long one. Whew. You made me work hard. Yes. Yes, and let me just say, I just wanted to thank Victoria, not myself, Victoria was. Victoria Voss, are you here? That's Victoria with a K who was so persistent and amazing, and she put together all of us actually like wildcats. So thank you, Victoria. Not me, the other Victoria. And Emiko may have something to tell you where she may direct us somewhere. Something interesting's happening, yeah?
Yes.
Tell us.
So today is Saturday, and here is the Oka Center. Maybe Genoveva can say something, but tonight will be the Oka night. So all artists and are also gathering, so it's gonna be really fantastic night. So this was short information from my side, but please enjoy the continuous festival, Ars Electronica Festival and Oka night. Thank you very much for your participation.